welcome to another Journey Through the Bible overview. Today we're going to be looking at the book of John, the Gospel of John. I really love the Gospel of John. I think out of all of the books of the Bible that I've had the privilege of teaching through, the personal study in the Gospel of John has had the greatest impact in my life. The Gospel of John testifies that Jesus, as eternal God, came into our fallen world to reveal God. It then shows how the people in the world responded to him. The theme of John's gospel is simply this, that Jesus is the revelation of the glory of God. We see that right out of the gate in chapter 1. Now you'll notice as you go through John that it is strikingly different from the three gospels that you just read through, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The first three gospel accounts are similar to one another in at least three ways. They're similar in the events that they record and in the structure that they follow and in the perspective that they give. But John's gospel is unique. Over 90% of the content in this gospel is not found in the other three gospels. And John actually doesn't record some of what is recorded in the other Gospels. For instance, there's no parables in John, there's no Sermon on the Mount in John, there's no Olivet Discourse in John. But what John does record, he records with a very specific purpose. He actually announces why he wrote the Gospel as you get toward the end. In John 20, verses 30 and 31, John writes this, "Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name." That's John's purpose for the things that he chose to record in this gospel. Now, the book of John is divided into two parts. The first section, which covers chapters 1 through 11, shows Jesus' glory manifested among sinners. And then in the second part, chapters 12 through 21, show Jesus' suffering manifested for sinners. Now, one unique feature in this gospel is the evidence that John gives that identifies Jesus as the Messiah, the Son of God. John records 7 signs that point to Jesus as God. These are given for the purpose of people believing. The first sign we find in chapter 2 was Jesus transforming 150 gallons of water into 150 gallons of wine. This sign points to the fact that Jesus as God is the creator. The second sign in John chapter 4 was Jesus' healing of a Roman nobleman's son who was actually 15 miles away. And the fact that Jesus healed him without having to be in the vicinity of where the healing took place is a sign that points to the fact that Jesus as God has no limitations. The third sign in chapter 5 was Jesus' healing of a lame man on the Sabbath. And this sign's purpose was to point to the fact that Jesus as God is Lord over the Sabbath. The fourth sign that we find in chapter 6 was Jesus' feeding of 5,000 people using just a few small barley loaves and a couple of small fish. And this sign points to the fact that Jesus as God is the bread or the sustenance of life. And then the fifth sign in chapter 6 was Jesus walking on the Sea of Galilee and then calming a storm. And this sign points to the fact that Jesus as God is master over his creation. The sixth sign that we find in chapter 9 was Jesus' healing of a lame man who was born blind. This sign points to the fact that Jesus as God is the light of the world. And then the seventh sign in chapter 11 is Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. And this sign points to the fact that Jesus as God is the giver of life. But it's not just these signs in John that point to who Jesus is. There are also 7 I am statements in which Jesus himself reveals his identity as God. And these statements are made so that people would believe. Jesus said, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door of the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I am the true vine. But besides these signs, and besides the I am statements, there are also 7 affirmations where other people assert that Jesus is the Messiah that was promised by God. And all of this is intended, again, to point people to Jesus as the Christ, the Son of God, so that they might believe. Now, in chapter 1, we find Andrew saying to Peter that we have found the Messiah. The word Messiah is, or the Christ, sometimes it's given, means the one who is the anointed king that's prophesied in the Old Testament. In John chapter 4, the woman of Samaria said to Jesus, I know Messiah is coming. And when he comes, he's going to reveal all things. Then Jesus said, I am he who speaks to you. The woman of Samaria then said to the men of the city, come see a man who told me everything that I have done. And then she asked them a question. Could this be the Christ? In John 4:42, then the men of the city said to the woman of Samaria, now we know that this indeed is the Christ, the Savior of the world. In John 7, some people from Jerusalem said, do the rulers know that this truly is the Christ? In John 10, the Jews surrounded Jesus and they said, how long do you keep us in doubt? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly. And then in John 11, Martha said to Jesus, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God who's come into the world. So throughout the Gospel of John, over and over, John is giving clear evidence of who Jesus is. He's the revelation of the glory of God. He is the Son of God. He is the Messiah, the anointed King who has come. And then John gives us access to see how people respond to all this evidence. And the purpose of the evidence, again, is so that people will believe. That's the purpose of the Gospel of John. But what's shocking as you read through John is that you see very few people actually believed. Instead, Jesus was rejected and he was put to death. So as you read through John, I hope that you are gripped with who Jesus is as God, with why he came, and the work that he accomplished for you on the cross. Enjoy your journey through the Gospel of John.